All right, we're going to get started with our AP Stylebook lesson. Okay, so AP Style is going to be interesting this semester because you do not have the physical AP Stylebooks at home, but most of the information that you will need from AP Stylebook, you're probably going to be able to find in this PowerPoint on here. If you do have specific questions on how things are written, you can always just chat me in the GroupMe chat. I have an AP Stylebook at home in case you need to figure out how to write something. All right, so what is the AP? It was founded in 1848, so a long time ago. Newspapers across the world wanted to gather together in order to gather international news coverage. Everything was a lot more local back then. So they formed something called the Associated Press. Today, the AP is the largest news organization. Newspapers and magazines have subscriptions to the AP. That could be subscriptions from the high school level all the way into like the New York Times has subscriptions to AP, right? And so if you need to fill some kind of space in your newspaper or magazine, you can always kind of purchase it or get it from the AP, right? Same thing with AP Images. You have photographers that go out and do freelance photography. They're probably also working for different organizations like this. They'll go out to different events, cover those events, take photos, send them into AP, and then get paid for them, right? So it's kind of an interesting association to work for. In 1977, they came out with the AP Stylebook, and basically it's a set of rules on how we should and shouldn't be writing different phrases, different things, using punctuation as journalists. So all these different things to kind of help you become a better journalist and figure out what exactly is the way we want to write things. You could compare this to different ways of writing like the MLA, the APA, those kind of different writing formats as well. So just like you need to format a paper in an academic style, you need to format whatever you're writing for journalism as far as AP writing, you need to form it in that kind of way. So what exactly is AP? Commonly accepted journalistic standards for usage, spelling, grammar, and punctuation. And the reason we have this is because it's very easy to read. It keeps writing concise, free of bias, and it's just the standard for all journalists. So why do we have AP Style? Because it's accurate, right? There's clarity between reporters. No one's questioning, oh, do I write it this way? Do I write it that way? I don't know, let's figure it out, right? We just have it right there in front of us. It's up to date. It actually gets updated, I think it's yearly now, but from what I've known ever since college, it's always been every 2 years. So they come out with a new style book every 2 years. With me right now, I have the 2016 version that also has a briefing on media law, which is kind of interesting. It's perfect for college classes. It's also very neutral. So we keep up with society. What is going on? How are people using different phrases? What is now kind of coined as a negative phrase, right? So it's very non-offensive because it's constantly updated. So we're going to go through the AP Stylebook as best as we can on here. Numbers. We always need to spell out whole numbers that are below 10. And then any numerals that start a sentence. So for example, 27 detainees were released yesterday. For large numbers, we always use a hyphen to connect them if they're ending in a Y to another word. So for example, something like 21 or 76,000. Now we're always going to use figures for anything 10 and above. So you're going to use those decimals instead, right? And then for all ages and percentages, okay? All right, as for places, addresses, these are interesting. We need to abbreviate the words street, avenue, and boulevard only after a numbered address. If you're saying that she lives on that boulevard, you're not going to have to abbreviate it, but if it is in some kind of address, for example, 50 South Court Street, we're going to abbreviate street. We also abbreviate compass directions if they're in, again, that numbered address, okay? So 50 South Court Street, right? Now, if you're saying she lives in the South, now we're talking about a region, right? We're not talking about an address. So you're actually going to have to spell out South. So states, we spell out the names of states unless they're preceded by a city, a county, or a military base name. We always spell out Alaska and Hawaii, and then any states with 5 or fewer letters. I'm from Iowa, so it's a good little 4-letter state right there. And we also live in Texas. We're going to spell out Texas. For any second references, we're going to abbreviate all of the state names. Okay, so if you're saying that I lived in California, great, spell out California. But if you're saying that city, then it's going to be abbreviated. Okay, let's talk about time, days versus dates. We are always going to use numerals without an ST, an ND, an RD, or a TH in dates. So we're always going to write it like this. So for example, what is today? It's April 8th. Right? So I'm not actually going to write that TH in my April 8th. It's just going to be April 8th, right? We always need to avoid using phrases yesterday, today, and tomorrow. And I think a lot of you guys do this already, which is great. But we always need to keep in mind that a story publication, we only get one time that our yearbook is published. We cannot be using things like yesterday, today, and tomorrow. When writing about events, we're always using months and dates. We don't just want to write the date or just the month, write both. And when referring to a month, a day, and a year, we're going to set them all off with commas. Okay, months. Never abbreviate months that are not immediately preceding a date. And abbreviate only if that month's name is 6 letters or longer, okay? Years. I love this gift. We add an S to the first year in a decade. Years are never spelled out. Even at the beginning of a sentence, we're going to use the figure. So for example, right here, 1968 was a good year. I'm told it's a period right there, but 1968 is not going to be spelled out, okay? I feel like this is more of like how 2020 is going, not really 2019. Okay, time of day. 8 p.m. tonight is very redundant. Instead, we are going to be writing just 8 p.m. or 8 p.m. Monday or whenever something is happening, right? You don't need to write tonight or today with your PMs and your AMs because you're saying it twice, basically. You're going to use figures except for noon and midnight. You can use these. If something is happening at noon, you can say noon. If something is happening at midnight, great. But if it's happening at 12:05 a.m., you have to use 12:05 a.m., okay? Write the time of days like this. It is always lowercase, not capitalized. And then we have our punctuation in between the letters. So compositions, we are always going to capitalize the first and the last word of a title. We capitalize all words that are 4 letters or longer. We do not capitalize articles like a, an, and the, or conjunctions or prepositions unless they are 4 letters or longer. To me, this can always get a little confusing, so having that AP style book is really important. If you need help, always just ask me. Sorry, that says in right there, but capitalize the title if that is the way the publication prefers to be known, okay? So these are just some examples, right? So the elements of style, we're not going to capitalize of, it's not 4 letters or longer. Gone with the Wind, it's an article, don't capitalize it, right? Okay, people. Capitalized formal titles before a name and do not separate a title from the name by a comma, okay? Titles that are coming after a name or standing alone are almost never capitalized, okay? So if they're coming after the name, they're almost never capitalized, except for nobility. Now, again, if you have questions on that, talk to me. So for example, I want you to look at this last sentence on here. Dr. Mojok, LSC president. President is not going to be capitalized, okay? Places. I don't know why I have this GIF in here. I think I just needed a place, so I chose America, Okay. General compass directions should be lowercase, okay? So if the warm front is moving east, we're not going to use that, right? But if you're talking about it as a region, compasses can get really confusing. So again, think about what's happening in addresses, what's happening as far as talking about things like the weather, for example. And then if you're talking about regions, right? So the Northeast depends on the Midwest for its food supply. Okay. Ethnic groups. There's a lot more on this in the AP style book. So if you have any questions, feel free to ask me. You could also probably Google this as well, and I'm sure there'll be some stuff that comes up. Okay. The thing about the AP style book is that it does cost money online. So I don't want you guys to pay for anything, of course. So if you have questions, just ask. So preferred usage for African Americans is Black, and it's not capitalized. The preferred usage for Hispanic or Latin descent is Latino or Latina. You could also say Latinx for different communities. But again, see the style book for particular regions. The preferred usage for Caucasians is white, and it's also not capitalized. The preferred usage for Asians is Asian, and it's capitalized. Now, of course, we could go into tons of different countries and regions, so you would have to ask me if you want to see a specific one. American Indian is capitalized with no hyphen in it, and it is definitely preferred over Native American. We're moving, forward with the times, so things are changing. Okay, let's talk about punctuation, because that's very important. And every once in a while I see some issues in the yearbook, and it'd be great if, we had Ava all the time with us to change everything we're writing, but we don't. And so really you need to be on top of this yourself, okay? As for commas, do not put a comma before a conjunction in a simple series. Basically, we don't use the Oxford comma in journalism, okay? So if you're listing different names like John, Paul, George, and Ringo, right, the Beatles, you're not gonna put a comma right here. We don't use it. If you're talking about red, white, and blue, again, no comma. We do use a comma to set up a person's hometown and age though, right? If you're using commas as you normally would in a sentence, you're not using in a simple series, then yes, you can definitely be using those commas. So, for example, this person, Joe Blow, comma, his age, 34, was arrested yesterday. Something like that, right? Okay. So placing a comma before and after the following. A year if it's following the month and the date. Okay, so November 6, comma, 1958, comma. A state if it's following a city or a county name. So Madison, comma, Wisconsin, right? Wisconsin short because we have to abbreviate it. And a positive, which is a word or phrase that says the same thing as a word or phrase next to it. So I saw my boss, John Smith. Your boss is the same as this person, right? In the hall. Okay, so you're gonna use those commas right there. A colon, we're gonna capitalize the first word after a colon only if it's a proper noun or the start of a complete sentence. Now we don't use a lot of colons in your book, and I try to just avoid using colons altogether. I use em dashes a lot more, but this is how you would write it. So example, he promised this, capitalize the, company will make it on all the losses. All right, it's basically a different sentence. Colons will go outside quotation marks unless they are a part of the quoted material, okay? It's a very interesting rule because most punctuation goes inside of the quotes. Hyphens, we use a hyphen for compound adjectives before the noun. So a well-known actor, a full-time job, or a 20-year sentence, okay? Now, we do not use it when the compound modifier occurs after the verb. So the actor was well known, her job became full-time, he was sentenced to 20 years, right? So this can always be a little confusing as well, but just try to keep these rules in mind, okay? A period. Use a single space after a period at the end of the sentence, and do not put a space in between initials. So if you're taking a look down here, for example, C.S. Lewis, we are going to want to not have spaces in between these letters right here. Okay. Quotations in the news. We use quote marks to indicate the exact wording of something. So they tell the reader, this is exactly what was said, right? Quote marks always appear outside the punctuation. This is so big. I've sometimes seen quote marks go inside of the punctuation and the period goes outside. That is incorrect. Do not do that. When a full sentence quotation is introduced or it's followed by an attribution, you have to place a comma between them. And then quotations that are questions only need a question mark. So you're not going to have to need a comma or a period. It's just that question mark. All right, quotations in the news. In dialogue, each person's words are placed in a separate paragraph with quotation marks. And please, please, please begin a new paragraph with each speaker. This is what I teach in Easy. I haven't always seen this in your book, but this is how it's supposed to go. We begin a new paragraph with each speaker. Now, it really is up to the editor-in-chiefs and the style guide and how they want to write things, because this can change. For me personally, I like to see us begin a new paragraph with each speaker. Okay? Now we're going to use single marks for quotes within quotes. He told me I love you. Single quotation marks inside a quote. If a quote is more than 2 sentences, you can use a colon after the attribution. Okay? All right. Spellings to make note of. Now, of course, there are a million more things that you could look up in the style book. These are just some things that we do say a lot in our language. You might actually write this a lot, so just kind of keep this in mind. We only spell harass with 1 R in journalism, kind of different. We use homicide, not homicide, right? We spell words kind of like that. Privilege, not privileged. It does depend on the different tenses, so you would have to look that one up. Embarrass has 2 R's, 2 S's. It is among, not amongst. Amid, not amidst. Afterward, not afterwards. An advisor, not advisor. Okay? So lots of little things to kind of make note of. So that is all I have for you for your AP style book. I would really just take this PowerPoint and then kind of keep it, save it somewhere so that whenever you are writing your story this semester, you can always come back to it. Yes, there's so much more in the style book. These are just some of the key things that I want to point out to you. And if you have questions, go ahead and ask me. Awesome. Thanks, guys.